Lord, but she hasn't sort of, I guess, had the full testimony. So yeah, in thinking that, I thought, okay, look, it's better for me to put some points onto the paper and be able to share a little bit of my life and my story with you today. So I was really blessed growing up in a Christian home in Fiji. Mom and Dad, they became Christians before I was born. Initially, they were Hindus. They converted. And from a young age, you know, because you grow up in a Christian home, you're exposed to things like prayer, things like, you know, reading the Word of God, and also, you know, things like church. They sort of become a real part of you as you grow up. So that was sort of my upbringing in some ways. Making the decision to give my life to Christ almost felt natural. You know, it was sort of like a natural progression in my step in walking with the Lord. But I would say it wasn't forced on me, but it was something that I wanted with all my heart. I remember the day I got baptized very clearly. You know, I was about 14 years old, and it was raining, and I was baptized at a beach. I was baptized along with my sister and a couple of other friends from church. I remember the feeling after baptism, you know, that feeling of great joy, that sense of being fully committed to God, ready to follow Him with all your heart. So I was overjoyed. I was this enormous sense of joy was, you know, I just felt in my heart when I got baptized. But as a new Christian, I realized that, you know, being raised in a Christian home does not make you immune to struggles, to trials, and to temptations. I guess that really started for me when I moved out of my home to pursue tertiary studies at a university. So the university was about 4 hours away from where my family home was. So I had to travel, and then I had to, you know, sort of live on my own. And suddenly I had all this freedom, you know, being away from home, being away from parents, no one really to sort of watch over you in some ways. But you would all agree with me that with great freedom comes even greater responsibility. At first, it was all rosy-dozy and exciting, but because I was away from home, that meant that I had to make a lot of decisions on my own. And sadly, most of these decisions at that point in time were made under peer pressure for me. I started to please friends rather than please God. I started to say yes to a lot of things that were not right. And I would say yes anyway because, you know, obviously you want to fit in with your peers. You want to belong with your peers. And as a result of that, I noticed that I started to drift away from God. And usually the funny thing is it begins with these very small actions, you suddenly you miss your daily devotion, you get distracted from praying, you start to skip a few Sundays of attending church, and in your mind it's all okay. But what had happened was it was a slippery slope, and the distance kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But during my final year at university, something shook me. My dad passed away. And it was a very difficult moment for me. Not only was I grieving the loss of my father, but my family's financial situation at that time was very unstable. Dad was the only one earning in the family, and suddenly he was no longer there, so we did not have the money coming in. With that weight of responsibility, I considered quitting university and starting work to help support my family. But somehow my mom made things work, encouraged me, and asked me to continue my studies. A couple of years later, my mom passed away. And for the first time in my life, I felt extremely alone. Losing my mom felt very unfair in a lot of ways. And I wrestled with a lot of emotions. And, those of us who have lost someone we love, you know that it's a pain that never fully goes away. It shakes your world, and sometimes it shakes your faith as well. In those moments, I think God really picked me up. I learned that faith isn't just about knowing that God exists. It needs to be lived out. So I pressed the restart button on a number of things in my life. I asked God for strength to keep going and the ability to rely on Him. And I started to take some small, steady steps towards restoring my relationship with God. And each step became a reminder that God was with me even when everything felt very uncertain in my life. He taught me patience when I wanted to rush into decisions. He taught me resilience when I wanted to give up. And He taught me to trust Him when I felt very alone. Even when life was really messy and uncertain for me, God's presence brought peace and perspective in my life. I've learned that His grace is enough no matter the situation, whether you're facing grief or whether whether you're dealing with challenging things like peer pressure. So I encourage anyone here today who's sort of facing similar challenges or probably have their own battles that they're fighting. You are not alone. Seek Him, and you shall find Him in your struggles, in your challenges, and even in moments when you feel disconnected to Him. So I'll wrap up by just saying something very simple. Give God a chance. He's never too far away. That's it. Thank you for listening.